What up, y'all? It's your boy, One Sir Grow, OSGOE. Hope that everyone's having a blessed day or night, some midday, somewhere in the world, wherever you are, because as I always say, it might be nighttime or it might be daytime or somewhere in between, wherever you are. So today's topic is how we switch up the format and we do positive things, which has always been the intention. So this is episode 26. We're actually now in our 26th episode. And we're just chilling, dude. Totally sober. 100%. Not a drop of whiskey or wine or beer or spirits. You know why? Because, dude, we don't have to do that. So the first 25 episodes were outrageous and over the top because that was our style back in the 1990s and early 2000s. But nowadays, dude, we just chill. So, a lot of cats, man, nowadays they say like gang. Well, dude, we're not active gang members, dude. We just, talk about the old days, dude, and just kind of like, it's just entertainment. You know what I mean? So when we all got together and we said, hey, we're going to do this new podcast, right? We actually intend for it to be a positive thing, dude. And we intend to keep doing positive things because, dude, we're really, truly positive, man. Like I played a lot of sports when I was a kid. Played basketball. Okay, well, I did play basketball for fun. I played pickup games. I did join a team at some point, but I didn't go to the first game. But interestingly, like during high school, I used to play basketball every single day after school with kids from the city, like big tall dudes that were like on teams. And one of my friends from my neighborhood, he actually, congrats to him too, by the way, he actually went on to the European League and he did well for himself, incredibly well. Good dude, man. Good family. And we grew up in the same neighborhood and he signed my yearbook and everything. So I played, I think, basketball like for like 10 years, man, like religiously because it's a fun sport, but I was never on a basketball team. My sport was track and field. I used to run they don't do it anymore. Kids don't, when I say kids, I mean high schoolers. They apparently don't do the 50-yard dash, but that was one of my races, events was the 50-yard dash. I also did the 100-yard dash and the 400 meter, and then what we used to call the long jump or the broad jump, interchangeably. I loved track and field, dude. That was my thing, man. And when I was a kid, I was like, dude, I want to go to the Olympics. I also did gymnastics. I was a big sports kid, man. Because we didn't have the internet, and all we had were books to read at the public library or that we bought through the book club of our school. Which my friends and cousin and I, biological cousin, man, we used to look forward to getting those 50-cent paperback books. I mean, I'm talking about the books that nowadays, like the same thickness of these books. I mean, they're kids' books. They're like 200 pages, 150 pages. Those same books in the like manga section of the like bookstore. Dude, those mangas, some of them are like $50, man. We were paying 50 cents for these books through the book club because, you use a discount because you get it through the school. And I'm talking about elementary school going into junior high school, into high school. So we used to read books, dude. And then we loved going to the public library, man, where they had all the books. And dude, we'd get dropped off there and we'd just spend the entire day at the library because, that's what kids did back then, dude. There was absolutely no internet. It was totally non-existent. The military had it and it was called ARPANET. But it wasn't a commercial product that was available to people. So we just read books, dude. Like we'd go to the library and just like thumb through books and I'm talking from sun up to sundown, dude. That's what we did in our town. And then we would like ride bikes and skateboards and scooters. And so I was also a big gymnastics kid. I loved gymnastics because I was always doing stupid daredevil stuff. And so my mother, since she was in the military and had a decent job, naturally more than decent serving her country. But I mean, financially at the time, like we were doing okay. She had gone to college, got her degree. We moved out of the low income neighborhood, and we ended up getting a condo in a higher end community, and she increased her rank in the military and had her college degree, and so at that point I was able to get gymnastics lessons. So I loved gymnastics equally as much as I liked track and field. I maybe even liked gymnastics more. And so I was between track and field and gymnastics. I ran state 2 years in a row for track and field. I made it to state. I didn't do very well at state, man. I placed fifth. And my thing is, dude, is that if you, and I mean, I'm saying this admittedly, like if you make it to state, like you'd better be like 1, 2, or 3, but I didn't, man. It was tough, dude, because those were kids from all over the state. But there was a time when I was a kid, dude, when they used to say that I was the fastest kid in the city that the north part of the city that I came from. But there were a couple of other kids, man, who I'd have to say I think they were faster than me, dude. There was a dude that I played football with because I also played football. Because again, that's all we had were sports, books, scooters, bikes, skateboards, outdoor, like rock climbing. My cousin was in the Cub Scouts, and so my uncle was one of the den leader like coordinators with, he wasn't the den leader, but he coordinated with the family, the man who was the den leader, and their son, not my cousin, but the family that did the den for the Cub Scouts, that was a pupil of ours, like a peer, like one of our fellow students. It was his home, and it was literally behind where I lived with my uncle when my mother would, be overseas or out of country or on her active duty assignments. I stayed with my biological cousin and his mother, my aunt, and my uncle, his father. And so the den leader for the Cub Scouts was literally like through the alley on the other side of the block. And he is a good friend of ours, man. I mean, to this day, like we're still connected, like via social media. But yeah, man, I was never officially Cub Scouts, but I used to go along with them, and we would go to like hike in the mountains, and they'd be like, "Come on, man, you come with the Cub Scouts today," and I'm like, "Okay." So we'd go and do what Cub Scouts do, and that was always fun and enjoyable. And so then back to these couple of guys, like when I played football, I started off playing flag football, and we played 3 years in a row. First year, we literally, this is a true story, dude. We lost every single game, like every game, because it was our first year playing flag football, and we sucked. Like we were terrible. And where I lived, man, there was this park where kids from all around the city, like literally from like northeast, southwest, they would all converge at this park. And there was this huge embankment, this hill that it was like dirt. And you couldn't do it before the game because you'd get in trouble because it would like dirty your uniform. But kids would want to go to the top of the hill. And then after the game, because you played football, so you might as well get dirtier, right? If you're a kid, if for fun, you could slide down this hill in the dirt. Like the way the soil was back then, it was like dry. And then like someone would find a piece of cardboard. It was like going down a slope of, it was like on a ski slope, but instead of snow, it was just dirt and sediment and grass. And somehow with the angle at, that particular like hill side, and it was a huge hillside too, dude, it's pretty cool. Your body, you would slide down the hill. It was made naturally that way. And so you'd see a bunch of kids from different teams do it. And then there were some parents who were like, "Come on, you're not going to slide down the hill, but coach said we could." And they're like, "Well, I oppose," but we did it. So when we played that year, we lost every game. Second year we played, which is pitiful. The second year we played, we actually started to win some games. Like we won. I mean, this is true. This is true like history. We won like half the games, and we were like, "Oh, we get it now. Like we know how to do this." The third year, we literally, on record, this is absolutely true, we won every single game, and there were 2 running backs, and We actually three. We went to state and we won the state championship. And our coach at the time, we used to pray because I'm from a Christian family, and would go to Sunday school religiously. And so, in our town, kids would pray whatever their faiths were, respectively, respective faiths. We would pray before the game back when America was different. And we enjoyed it. Like we wanted to pray. And the coach, who, by the way, he ran for office, great dude, man, aged very well, still around too. And he would lead the prayer, and then on the final game, he asked us, because we were undefeated, and it was basically like the last play of the game, and he was like, or coming up on such, and he was like, so we went to huddle, and he was like, do you guys want to let the other team like score, just like out of kindness, and because we were still going to be undefeated, anyway. And we thought about it, man, and just given like our history, because we were the same, we played, my teammates, we were all the same, like players, like from the same school and system. And so we grew up with each other, and we lost every game the first year. We won half the games the second year, and we just kind of looked at each other, and we seriously considered it, because we were like, do we want to let them get it? Like what? And then we were just like, nah, man, this is our year to dominate. And so we just went out, man, and we just wasted them, dude. And we just won. We were undefeated, and they didn't score a single point in that game. And then we went to we went to state championships, dude, and we were the champs. So that was it, man. And so we got our trophies and, all of that kind of stuff. So when I was a kid, man, I was seriously into sports, like for a good solid, like 14 years, like just hardcore sports. And then when extreme sports came around, like skateboarding and whatnot, but extreme, I was a big skateboarder. And there were a couple of kids, dude, who, as I was alluding to, when we would play football, when we got to junior high school, and I was on the football team in junior high school, there a couple of the guys from the Boys and Girls Club from when we were younger, who two of them, I mean, granted, the two dudes were both of them a year older than me, but they were faster than me, dude, and I gave them props. And the coaches would have us race each other, and to see who was the fastest. And there was one dude, I could get him a couple of times, but I knew back then, when I was in junior high school, that he was a superior runner, and so I kind of dialed back on sports when I was in high school. I was like, yo, man, I want to get more art. I want to get into arts and do like drawings and like paintings and like illustrations and things like this. So I actually started to take art courses. I took art courses in high school. I took wood shop, woodworking. I was a big Nintendo geek and still am. I love video games. I haven't had a game system since then. But I've played, the game systems when I've been at like, my cousins' homes and like relatives and like friends and whatnot. I've played, I think, every system that there is. I even played the new Switch. I played the Zelda game, and what is that, Wake of the Wild or something like that. I should know the name of it, man. I was actually in Nintendo game guide when the Nintendo Power when I was a kid, because I entered the competition and was the 8th person in the US to complete the Legend of Zelda, and got my name in the Nintendo Power at the time. The dude who beat me in that game competition, that was a national game competition too, by the way. His name was Noah Hoffman. Noah Hoffman was number 1, dude, and that's real history. Look it up, Nintendo Power, bro. First dude in the United States to complete the Legend of Zelda, and I was number 8. So, I'm sorry, Breath of the Wild. What am I talking about? Breath of the Wild. That game is ultra fresh too, by the way. If anyone hasn't played it, if you know anything about it or not, man, how they've evolved with game technology. I mean, especially, being humble and not being like conceited. I'm a humble dude, man. I actually am. I'm not egotistical, dude. I'm just telling you that I was a game nerd and I love video games. And having been in that game competition when I was a kid and working toward the goal of like being a video nerd champ, um, the subsequent games, I played Zelda 2, completed it. I played all of the Zelda games up to the Ocarina of Time. Breath of the Wild, I my cousins there, they keep up on the game world and they keep me abreast of the game world. I haven't completed that game, but dude, the technology, man, of the Zelda, and I read somewhere at some point Zelda was actually the number one video game franchise in in like world history. Like Zelda like beats out, at least at the time, like every game storyline like ever in history. Beats out Final Fantasy, beats out Metroid, beats by the but speaking of which, Metroid is a royally awesome game as well, dude. And I would equate, like, I understand that financially, revenue wise, I mean, I put Metroid and Zelda on equal footing because I love Nintendo, dude. Like, I'm not really a big PlayStation dude. Like, I don't dislike PlayStation, and I know that that's like the norm now. But keep in mind, dude, I'm an old school gamer. I come from like the era when I played the old Atari. I played Pong before it because I had some wealthy cousins that actually had Pong. I don't know if it's true, but I heard that Pong is like in the Smithsonian. Actually, I think I read that. I'm pretty sure, and that like copies that are functional, like if someone had, because it was all one like unit thing. Dude, that thing is worth like, I mean, don't quote me on this, but I saw somewhere like if you had an original, dude, somewhere, it's like 20 grand or whatever, maybe even more now. But it's pricey, dude, because it's an heirloom and it's mint Smithsonian. So I played all those systems, man. The Commodore 64, Amiga, Sega. I wasn't a huge Sega fan. In fact, I quite disliked Sega. Like, I liked some of their games, like Shinobi, kind of, sort of, like at the arcade level. But dude, I didn't have a Sega system, and Sega was weird to me, and I felt partial to Nintendo. So I always just loved Nintendo, and I was like, I can't get down with another system, dude. That's not cool. Man, who is this Sonic the Hedgehog, dude? Man, no way. Come on, dude. I'm a Mario guy. I did play Sonic the Hedgehog, like a few, different iterations of it, and I was like, it's alright, but come on, man, it's like Mario rules this arena, right? Well, I mean, that's my opinion, maybe not yours, but the point is, man, is that like we were huge gamers. So when I was in high school, dude, from junior high school into high school, it was all Nintendo, dude. We used to share like Nintendo codes. Like, that's how nerdy we were. Like, when we would go to recess, dude, we would share Nintendo codes. Like, yo, you got the one for yeah, you got the one for Gradius. Gradius probably sounds insignificant to you if you're not from my generation or era. You probably don't even know what Gradius is. Gradius was another super rad game from Nintendo, and I believe it's Konami that made the game. And the passcode was like up, up, down, down, left, right, BA select. And that was the passcode to a lot of different games. By the way, spoiler alert. But Konami was dope. Capcom was dope. Honestly, those Nintendo games from the 1980s, there's something about the way that they were designed that was so masterful. They exceed and surpass. They're unmatched in my view, even in today's like world. I'm not, there's like super fabulous like games now that I'm like, yeah, that's a rad game, dude. Like, it's so like 3D, like immersive, almost holographic. If you got some goggles, it is, right? You know what I'm saying? Virtual VR. It might as well be holographic. But even so, dude, those original 8-bit Nintendo games with the MIDI sound, even though they were like little square characters and whatnot, the way that they were designed, how they took your peripheral and made your peripheral go away, like it was like you were in the game. And it was like that, like when you watch a movie and then all you see is the screen and you don't see like, all right, you're just in the movie, right? Like, just totally in it. That's how the Nintendo games were, man. And it didn't matter that they were like blocky, like square, geometric shapes, like giving the impression that, it's contour and rounded. I mean, dude, even so, like those original fucking games, dude, were the best, like in my opinion, of all time. Like, I played the emulator system before. And I was just going through playing like, I don't know, random like dozen old games or 2 dozen old games for like days, dude, because I had the emulator hooked up. And I was just like, oh, dude, I totally remember this game. And I was just playing it, man. And then off and on over the course of like, I don't know, dude, like a month, I just pull out the emulator, go on, because there were, I don't know, dude, like 5,000 games. I don't even know, dude. It was just like a library of these old school games. Some of them that I had always wanted to play when Nintendo first debuted, but I didn't have, they were like obscure games, and plus just cost like, prohibitive, because, dude, games back when I was a kid were like $50, dude. They had gone up to like $50. You know what? I don't even know how much fucking games cost today. Like, if I were on a game show and someone was like, for $1 million, I do not know how much games cost nowadays. I do know that when I was playing Nintendo games, were up to like $50. And they had gone up because they were originally like, I think $25, $30. But then, of course, you could rent them. So once the rental thing came around, it was like, why spend $50 when you could just go and rent like 5 games over the weekend or however many, beat them, in other words, complete them and then take them back. But yeah, man, I played all the old school systems, the Atari. What is it? Atari, was it 2600, I believe, something like that. I always wanted to play the Famicom, the Nintendo in Japan that wasn't in the States, where they were like generations ahead of our games. We had a buddy from high school, and he had gone to Japan, and he came back with because the games didn't work on our. So one of the things about Nintendo was like on the NES, the old school, you could literally and I had another cousin who worked at Nintendo in Redmond, Washington. But before he did, I mean, I had been playing Nintendo, dude, for fucking like, I want to say like 10 years. And then ultimately he got a job there. And he's an older cousin of mine. But a lot of people who don't know, the old Nintendo Entertainment System, the original NES, you could flip it over, and then there's a little compartment, and you can pull it out. You can pull the little hatch on it, and there's a little compartment where it takes IC integrated circuits, like chips that you could put in. And what Nintendo would do in Redmond, Washington, is when they would get their games and they would test them, they weren't always cartridges like we play, like as consumers. They'd get the little chips, and then they put them in the game through the little port on the bottom, and they would like test games that way on these little chips, these little, wafers. At least that's what I was told. And I believe it was the Nintendo company that told me that. Don't believe that, because I don't even know how accurate that is, or if that's a false memory. But I do remember talking to someone at Nintendo, which, by the way, my grandmother was pissed because I thought it was free to talk to Nintendo. I racked up a like $2,000 like telephone bill because it wasn't. Because what I'm saying is like, if you were a kid, you could call in and you could talk to the gamers at Nintendo, the game experts, and they would give you like tips and stuff and help like you solve different like issues with the Nintendo, like if it was freezing up or doing this and that. So they had a support line like where you could call in and you could actually talk to the video gamers at Nintendo, and it was fresh. And so yeah, and then so when we were again in school, like we were all about games. And one of our buddies, as I was beginning to say, one of our friends from childhood, he had gone to Japan, and he was able to get a game back into the States at the time that I can't remember what it was. I don't think he had Famicom, but he could somehow get the game to play. And maybe I can't remember what the import-export rules were at the time, but he had something of Japanese origin from Japan that was not stateside on the market at the time, and he had brought back from Japan magazines. So the Nintendo like magazines like at the time in Japan, and that for us, dude, was mind blowing to see that. Like, because most kids in the States didn't have that, dude. It didn't exist in the US, and you couldn't buy it. So to be thumbing through and like flipping through and reading these Nintendo magazines that were from Japan, like, to see them and be able to like physically like touch them, and then he and you know, and then to play games with him, and then to see the the version, and he might have had like more than one game, and again, I can't remember what it was, but dude, I'm gonna tell you, man, some of the games, dude, back then that were a little bit obscure, that not everyone like knew about. So it'd be like, I think today, like Madden is one of those games that's pretty ubiquitous. It's, you know, like people who play games, that like, who doesn't know about Madden, right? So at the time, back in the 1980s, going into the 1990s, there were games that were pretty obscure, but that were some of the raddest games, dude. Seriously, of all space time. I'm gonna give you some examples. Solomon's Key, dude. Let me explain something to you, man, about Solomon's Key. Solomon's Key is one of the most difficult games I've ever played. In fact, it took me, I think, 5 years to complete the game, and that's an actual number. And it was a game where you have a wand and you create blocks. You like generate a block, and then I think that's how it worked. You would generate a block, and then you could like destroy a block. So it's like a magic wand. So it's like, boom, there's a block, then you can jump on it, right? And then there might be a section that you need to go to, and so then you would like break a block into pieces, and then it's gone, right? You move it out of the way, or something like that. I can't remember exactly how it worked, but that game was so complex. You get to these levels that are incredibly challenging, and I think there's also something like when you get to the end of it, like the last 5 levels, and there are, I think, 100 levels. When you get in, and don't quote me on that because it's been like 30 something years, dude, ish. When you get to the last levels, if you fail, like your guy dies, right? You gotta go back. I think, man, it might even be like 15 levels. So the thing is like there's no one knew any cheat codes or anything. And plus, man, you wouldn't want to cheat on that game anyway. Like you wouldn't want to use a cheat code. Like you got to understand, dude, Solomon's Key was an incredibly super awesome game, dude. So we finally figured it out. I was actually in Antioch, California, in the desert, in this neighborhood, upscale, affluent, friend of my uncle's, and we had gone to Disneyland in Anaheim, and then while we were in town, we stopped through at this friend of his and his family and his children at the time who were older than us. They were teenagers. Were they young adults? I mean, I was like 12 years old, dude, and they might have been 18 or whatever at the time. But there was a son and a daughter, dude, and they had a hot tub out back, dude, and like they were in the desert, and it was Antioch. There was some sports stars that lived out there, and we went to the super rad. There's an artificial lake that later I looked it up as an adult, like, oh yeah, I remember Antioch that summer. It was pretty fresh. They had this RV competition with these radio controlled vehicles, and it was at this huge outdoor thing in that community of Antioch. And that was the coolest thing that I'd ever seen in terms of like remote controlled cars, because it had the big cars and like the community would come together, and it was at nighttime, and it was super well organized, and it was like very like well structured. Like there were hundreds of people, like 1,000 people, like there were a lot of people there. But then during the day, there was this lake that people would go to, and that's the very first time I ever tried to skim like a boogie board. That you run along the shoreline and then you push the board. Some people don't know what skim boards are, or boogie boards. That's why I'm explaining this. So instead of surfing like out in the water, you have this board thing that you like literally like throw along the water, like along the shore. And as it's like skimming across the water, you run and jump on it, and you then start to like skim along the water. They're incredible. And then it was a short distance. You could like swim across the lake to this embankment. It's like a little jetty kind of sort of out there. So there's a little mesa of, like rock and sand that you could like swim across to. And then you could go up that hillside of this like mesa, and you could look back at people on the other side and then around. Well, apparently, man, beneath that was within that area, there were these different like similar lakes. Those places were apparently artificially created. They're not naturally occurring, and those were nuclear missile silos, dude. And the government, to hide it, like in the event of something catastrophic, they built these lakes, these man-made lakes on top of those nuclear missile silos, dude. And that's a true story. Like, you can look that up. Antioch, California, nuclear missile silos hidden beneath artificial man-made lakes. It was something that they did during the Cold War, and a lot of people in the community had no idea. They were just like, oh, there's a lake here. Well, how was it made? Well, they made it. And they're like, oh, okay. But they didn't know that our government like went in like at nighttime with like covert black ops and put fucking nuclear missiles beneath the lakes, dude. And it was nuts. But the reason I tell you all that, that's the summer that I completed the Solomon's Key. And dude, if you knew, like if you don't know, like if you've never played Solomon's Key and you have no idea, the end of Solomon's Key is probably one of the best endings of any game in the history of like any video game, dude. When you find out and don't look it up, dude. Don't go to YouTube. That'd just be stupid, dude. You'd ruin it, and it's dumb. I mean, dude, if you want to know the end of Solomon's Key, play the game, man. Get you the old game and play it all the way through and see how long you can do it. And then when you see the end of it, you'll understand, dude, how complex it is and how extraordinarily like dude, the end of the game is magnificent, bro. It's that great of a game. So there were games like that. Milon's Secret Castle. I said Milon's Secret Castle. Dude, one of the raddest games of all time. Kid Icarus, like the Greek, right? The old school like mythology. Kid Icarus, bro, one of the raddest games ever made in the history of the world. So these games, like Kid Icarus was actually a big game. Like it was promoted. It was considered like one of the blockbuster games. It wasn't an obscure game. Nonetheless, one of the best games, dude, of all time. Just the way that it was, put together. There's another game called Faxanadu. That's the name of the game. It's like Fax Faxanadu, Anadu, I believe. Faxanadu. Faxanadu was this fantasy game. It's not like role play. So no, these are all side scrolls too, by the way. These are not like the multiplayer games that people play nowadays. These are the old school vintage Nintendo games. Faxanadu, one of the like lesser known greatest games of all time. There's another game, Legendary Wings. Legendary Wings, man, was rad. Dude, there are just so many of them, man, like that. That Castlevania, like that's a big name. That's not an obscure name. But one thing that is interesting, dude, if you are in the world of games, there was a game that was huge in the 80s. Perhaps you've heard about it. It was one of the blockbuster games. It was called I gotta think about that. Ghouls and Ghosts? No, Ghosts. Okay. So this is how I play it. It's called Ghost and Goblins, right? And this, like, I should not have like spaced the game like I just did. Ghosts and Goblins was one of the games that was up there with like Super Mario Brothers and Castlevania and you name it, like any of the big games that came out back then. Contra. It wasn't an underground, like low key game. It was a stand-up game that they had at the arcade. I mean, before Mortal Kombat and these games like Street Fighter and such, you had Ghost and Goblins. Like that was the game when you went to the arcade that people were playing. It was like, yo, what level are you on Ghost and Goblins, right? Ghost and Goblins was a big game. But what a lot of people who even played Ghost and Goblins didn't know was years down the road, they came out with, I don't know, I can't even remember if it was the same company that made Ghost and Goblins. But there was a game, if you just understood, like if you just understood how big, right, how widespread video games were back then before this new era of like Xbox and, all these different platforms and systems that are like super futuristic. Ghost and Goblins was a mega game that most kids throughout America who played video games knew about. What most of those same individuals like throughout America who played Ghosts and Goblins didn't know, They came out with another game, man, called Ghouls and Ghosts. So many years beyond that. And I was at a bowling alley one night, and I saw it, and I was like, and like when I first glanced at it, I thought it was Ghosts and Goblins, and I was like, oh, dude, they brought Ghosts and, because it's like, man, 10 years later or something like that. I was like, oh, they did a re-up on like they did a different version of Ghosts and Goblins for like, and then I was like, wait a second, that doesn't fucking say what? I was like, whoa. What is Ghouls and Ghosts? Dope. The fact that whoever did that was brilliant. Okay, that was so slick the way they like sneaked that into the stand-up arcade world. Another game, Roston. Yeah, dude. In fact, I'm gonna give you two games that sound similar and that are both super incredibly epic. Roston. Dude, do yourself a favor if you're not familiar with Roston. Rastan. Okay, so Romeo, Alpha, Sierra, Tango, Alpha, November. Roston. Go on YouTube, dude, and look up that game and just hit play and listen to the soundtrack. Dude, whoever created that game, they went all out on the soundtrack to the game. Like, I would say that's probably the best soundtrack to any of the games back then. Like, it's a different, the way it was done, it was abnormal for a game to have a soundtrack that was that rad. Like, the games were already rad, but that, dude, listen to that. Roston. Just watch the walkthroughs, listen to the background music, and you'll be like, oh, what? This is tremendously fresh. Another game, I said two, that sound alike, that are kind of in some ways similar, but different. Rygar. Rygar. And listen, man, I'm not in front of like a laptop or a desktop or a computer, dude, or, any like device. Dude, I'm telling you, these are games that are like the back of our hands, dude. Like, we grew up, this is all we did, man. I mean, we played pinball too. But Rygar. Romeo, Yankee, Golf, Alpha, Romeo. So Rygar. Rygar. Dude, okay, so that game was at the arcade, right? Just like Roston. And in some ways, they're kind of sort of the same. I don't think they bit each other. I don't even know what the backstory is on that. But but they kind of they were similar in some ways. That wasn't a bad thing. That wasn't bad at all. Rygar, when it came to Nintendo, the home entertainment system, when you could get it on the home entertainment system, I mean, dude, just understand, we used to go and pump quarters into video games. We had to go and like mow lawns and like rake leaves and shovel snow. And, I'm from a middle class family, man. So it's not like we had like quarters galore. It's like I had to like wash cars and like do work around the property or like go out and like, make a lemonade stand in the neighborhood or something, man. And so, we had a limited number of quarters. When they came out with the game system, with the Nintendo Entertainment System, when Nintendo came out with the NES, the deluxe system with the light gun and Rob the Robot. By the way, I still own Rob the Robot, and I own Rob the Robot, and he is in styrofoam, and yeah, man, he's fully intact. Like, I kept Rob the Robot, robotic. Okay, so Rob stood for Robotic Operating Buddy, and Robotic Operating Buddy was the thing at the time that Nintendo first came out and debuted with the home system. So you could get so again, R.O.B. It's abbreviated for Robotic Operating Buddy, right? I saw the whole backstory on Nintendo's development of Rob and why Rob was a novel thing, not to diminish or downplay it. I don't know, dude, that it's even scientifically possible to complete the game, Gyromite, with Rob. I seriously don't. Like, I don't doubt like Nintendo's ingenuity and its rocket science. You know, I don't doubt Nintendo. But dude, I don't know how it's possible to do it. If you understand what I'm referring to, if you're from that era, or even if you're not, Rob would take these little discs and he would pick them up and then he would put them on this little spinner pad thing, and these little gyros would spin, and I think there were two of them, and they would spin, and then he would with his robotic operating body, he would like swivel and he would like drop them on the control pad, right? So the controller that you play the game with. So the whole idea was that if you've got your controller, right, and you're playing Gyromite, Rob is sitting next to you. If you don't have a buddy other than, this robot, he would chill with you, dude, on the other controller as player number 2, and he would fucking play Gyromite with you, dude, by spinning these little discs. But that game becomes increasingly complex as you get to, I think it has like 100 levels too, or more. Like, I don't remember exactly. And then I think it flips and you've got to do it you got to do it twice to complete it. Because a lot of games, you couldn't just go through once. Like, then you had to start from the beginning, and it got increasingly like faster and like with more enemies and more this and that. So you'd have to do it 2 times to like ultimately like fully complete the game. And I don't see how it's possible to play Gyromite without cheating, because what a lot of people ended up doing is we figured out that like you would basically like take the controller out of Rob's hands, you would turn him off, and you would just have both controllers, and you would adapt to that, those parameters without him. And you would be like, all right, take Rob or robotic operating buddy out of that video game equation, and I've got 2 controllers now, and I'm going to adapt in this scenario environment space, and I'm going to co-rock both paddles in the game, i.e. controllers. And then it was easier to do it, dude. Totally. I mean, it wasn't totally easier, but it was easier to do it, and it was still challenging. Gyromite was a trip. Then the light gun game, that was for Duck Hunt. And that was a trip, dude. People shouldn't be shooting ducks, dude. If they, just for fun, in my view, but people do, and that's their thing. But back in the day when we were kids, we're like, oh, look, it's like Duck Hunt. So, you just blast on some birds, dude. I mean, that's, not really kosher, dude. Like I said, in my book, but whatever, that was the game, and that was a big game at the time. And, I'm sensitive to like animal rights folks and whatnot, but I'm just saying, dude, Duck Hunt was dope. And, for the time, because it was a video game, and it was the game that came with the Nintendo Entertainment System Deluxe. And if you didn't get the Deluxe, you didn't get the light gun, and you didn't get Rob. You just got the game system and the 2 controllers. The advantage was the super controller with the knob on it. Dude, the Nintendo Advantage, when they came out with the Nintendo Advantage controller with the rapid, like you could have like rapid fire, like brrr, right? You just push the button, you go rapid. That was the game changer, dude. At any rate, man, thanks for checking out this 26th episode. Do some research online, man. We're keeping it positive, and this is 100% sober recorded episode of 495 Casting Worldwide Celebrities. But yeah, man, the video game era of the 1980s and 1990s, even before that in the 70s, man, with those old school like dot pixel games, man, Atari Breakout, dude, Asteroids, Space Invaders, Centipede, oh my God, you name it, man. Those were seriously, dude, the raddest games of all time. And in my opinion, in my humble opinion, truly, dude, they still are. Pac-Man, Super Pac-Man, man, they're endless, dude. I'm just trying to think of some other games, man. Zaxxon, there's a game called Zaxxon. Look that up. Qbert, Missile Command. Oh my God, dude. 18 seconds left. What other games were out there, man? So many. The original Mario Brothers.
Dude, the original, just not Super Mario Brothers, Mario Brothers. Check it out, y'all.